For those of you here, can you hear me? Cool. What is up? You normally get me, you get all the sounds of LA. Very lovely sounds. It Blanders, Coat Jolly. Robert stole the tip. Where is everyone from? I'd love to know. Yeah, exactly. Pretty commonplace for this part of the world. Maine? Vancouver? Oh, wow. Woohoo. One of my people. Dallas, Sweden? I'd love to go to Sweden. Oh my god. I've never been. My partner's been, did an exchange there, and she really loved it. So one day. Bidford. UK. Sloterdijk. Yeah, Sloterdijk's cool. I don't know. I haven't really sat down and been like, I'm going to really understand Sloterdijk now. So I feel like my opinion is not, it's not trustworthy. Gardner. What is Dallas like? Is Dallas worth visiting? Just noticed what a tranquil, nice background. It's one of the nice things about Los Angeles. It's the climate. Because I still have my place in Montreal, and it's like you cannot do this in Montreal in March. You're biased, Alexander. Yeah, I'm sure it's nice. I bet I've heard Austin's nice too. It's maybe the rest of Texas. I'm like maybe wouldn't be the best place. maybe I wouldn't enjoy it quite as much. But cities tend to get it right. Saint Lazare, of course. City bucket list? I'd love to go to Tokyo. I'd love to go to Kyoto. That'd be cool. Ho Chi Minh. I mean, I've never been to Asia, so mostly I want to see cities there. I'd love to go to Mexico City. I've never been. Yeah, never been to Mexico. Never been to Mexico City. Um, might go to. Would like to go to Tijuana too. It's supposed to be beautiful. Uh, that's a good question, Alex. It was weird leading up to Christmas because I celebrate Christmas, but like being in LA and not having the seasons change made Christmas weird. It felt wrong listening to Christmas music in December when I was outside like this. It just it doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel right. Oh yeah, there we go. Someone's got the reference. I didn't. I should have put a shirt on that doesn't have like secret code on it, but Nico gets it. But I like the change of seasons, but I don't like winter. So I'm kind of in a horrible place in life. But the weather in Los Angeles is exactly what I need. It's perfect. I'm, I'm just such a sucker for the heat. It's unbelievable. What texts are you teaching in your classes right now? Oh, in the I'm teaching a conspiracy theory class, and we're reading Jack Bradich and his conspiracy panics. In my intro to critical theory class, we're reading Audre Lorde and bell hooks this week. And in the justice class that I'm teaching, we're reading Thomas Hobbes. Yeah, we're reading Thomas Hobbes. So that's what we're reading right now. I could tell you about all the books throughout all the classes, but that'd probably be boring. Do you prefer hardcover or paper cover? Always easier to transport. You know, it's more malleable, more accommodating. How eager are undergraduates in your classes to read and discuss? You never really know how much reading they do. I don't. I'm not a big fan of like quizzing students on whether or not they've read stuff, or like pop quizzes and stuff. They're adults. I think that it's important to let them be adults and make their own decisions. And I think for me, I like to teach class in a way that's like accessible and allows students, even if for whatever reason that they may not have had time to do the readings, they can still participate. And participation is generally pretty good. Like my students are all really great, so it makes my life easy. And we might, for those of you who've never been in LA, you might get the privilege of hearing one of the wonderful helicopters that fly over pretty frequently in the city. Pretty pretty fun time. Theory incredibly daunting in the beginning. Yeah, of course. Marvy, I had no idea what was going on. You just read it, and you just gotta read more and more, and make sure to take notes. That's really important. And it's not to think that you're supposed to totally understand it. Google or any other search platform is also a very good friend to have. But the more you read, the more connections you start to make between texts, the more you see ideas, common patterns and themes remain consistent across certain writers' work and thinkers, and then you're able to draw these connections, and it all kind of starts to make sense. But like, whether or not there are these connections to be made is one thing, and how much of it is us just like imposing an understanding onto these texts to help them make sense. So I like to really try to try to approach each text as a thing on its own, and really try to understand it in itself, instead of being like, oh, yeah, it's part of this tradition. You're supposed to understand that whole tradition to really understand the text. Like, that's all important, but you can really, like, every text is unique, and just understanding it at the level of the argument is good, even if you find it daunting and find making this general connection to a broader canon. Even if you struggle with that, you'd still be able to get a lot out of it. Doing a PhD in social theory, what university department discipline would best fit that, and more generally, how are the career prospects, job market, and academia? Those things aren't great. The job prospects and job market in social theory and academia, it's not great. It's like across the board. There are fewer and fewer jobs, and yeah, I see a lot of people struggling. Where I'm at now is like just on a contract basis. Like, who knows what the future holds. It's not the. I'm sorry I can't paint a rosier picture of it, but if you love it, there's value in doing it just for that reason. How do you think the availability of web search changes how people come to understand concepts? Well, web searches are hardly hardly just provide like a neutral account of any given author's work. Like if you use like ChatGPT, which might not be exactly what you're talking about, like it'll never give you a very good answer if you ask it to describe like what Foucault's project is or like anything like that. It'll give you a very vague kind of general idea, and you need to really coach it to give more direct, clear, actually accurate answers. And I think the same applies to a lot of search engines and searches, because searches are only as good as the questions you ask. And if you're asking wrong questions, like what is Baudrillard arguing? You're already off. You're already on the wrong, off to the wrong start, because there's no like single Baudrillard or no single Foucault or no single like Judith Butler. There's so many changes that they undergo. It's more the value that I find in these type of web searches is to maybe give you like help you understand references that writers make, which allow for more speedy comprehension instead of seeing a reference in a text that you don't understand and then having to go dig through the library to find a text explaining that term. That takes a ton of time. But yeah, I to go back to rationalist question, I mean, it depends who you are. Are you in the States? It's because some great programs that use like University of Chicago might have something, Purdue maybe, or Duquesne. Duquesne might have something good too, but yeah, granted, where I did mine at University of Western Ontario is pretty good. I think it's called the Theory and Criticism Program. Should the canon be opened up, abolished, or should we have a counter canon? I don't know. Here's the helicopter. Canon. I just tend to resist canon thinking as much as possible. I find it less descriptive of what an author is doing and more like prescriptive. It's more imposing an idea upon an author, like just subsuming all the work from Kant to Schelling and Fichte under the banner of German idealism, or to just a clump like everything from Sojourner Truth's anti-woman speech to like Judith Butler's gender trouble as just like feminism or belong to the feminist canon is just like it does less to describe any of these people's work and more to like impose an identity onto them to make them more easily consumable and marketable, especially in the university system now that like has to very clearly set its boundaries, like what math is doing, what comparative literature is doing, and like really making sure that the boundaries are clearly established. So it serves a function in that respect that goes down, like in a lot of cases, industry lines. Like you have to make yourself marketable, and these fields marketable, and they do less to actually, I think, help people understand things. But I think it's just Estonia. How's Estonia? I bet it would be great to visit. How has the response been to your Foucault video? Good. I mean, I don't think any. I mean, it's all good points. I think. I don't know. Honestly, I think that I provide a decent view on the issue, but a few people push back a little bit. How do you think a Baudrillard fan should incorporate his philosophy into their own discourse actions? I'm thinking specifically of when he spoke of taking things to a conclusion. Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know if Baudrillard gives a very clear roadmap as to what like action would look like, at least motivated from his thought, because he's all about play, all about disturbing norms. It's kind of, not falling into the various traps set out by ideology or simulation, and to embrace like the unknown, embrace the incomprehensible, leave room for all that stuff, and not to like submit very neatly to any identity or idea. At least that's how I'm motivated by his thought in terms of my existence in the world. Hi, Clark. I don't know if the internet has too much information. I mean, it's such a difficult thing to even. I have no idea. I don't know. I think that I don't know if anyone's ever like. I guess you're confronted with information overload if you're scrolling through X or any other platform like that. But I think it's also like, you know, to suggest the internet is like this overabundance of information, just in a sense, kind of treats the internet as this like neutral zone of just like easily accessible information for like internet cowboys to just like pull from, when actually a lot happens between the moment you type in something to search and you receiving that search result, where it's very much catered to you. Using your data, using various algorithms, drawing from your data to best cater search responses to what you want, demonstrates to me that it's less about treating the internet as this like just this treasure trove of resplendent information, and more a very like highly selective and catered body of information that finds its way to you. And a lot of the time it knows what you want better than even you do, which is kind of scary. But will you cover Deleuze's logic of sense? I would like to, yeah. um, I really should. It'd be a text I'd cover with. I would actually try to get a friend of mine to chat with me about it, because I really struggle with the Deleuze stuff um, on his own, like the difference in repetition, logic of sense. They're really hard. And if I look closer to a friend of mine who's actually his name's Curtis, who's actually been on a few times to talk about some texts, some chapters from A Thousand Plateaus, that would help. So maybe I'll cover it one day. But hey, from Theory Underground. Oh, Dave from Theory Underground. Yeah, of course. Dave, sure. Glad to hear it's helpful. Theory Underground. Yeah, Dave and Mikey and others. Yeah, great to hear. No problem, Daniel. Cool. Yeah, maybe don't say where you're going to go study. I mean, keep some anonymity. I hope that your philosophy program isn't just like philosophy of classes, like philosophy of logic or philosophy of science, or hopefully you get a wider array, of courses than just the analytic bunch. Did I get job offerings or look for work outside of academia? Yeah, I used to work for the federal government in Canada for in the last year of my PhD. I was working for them. And yeah, I mean, in my job interview there, we were just talking about Nietzsche and Thomas Nagel's "What Is It Like to Be a Bat?" Because at the time, my boss, who would eventually be my boss, was interested in that stuff. Which, I mean, that's a funny coincidence, but I think that to make a more general point, I think that the humanities and what they offer is actually surprisingly sought after by employers, because the humanities, philosophy, English, and stuff, they really teach people how to like understand the world and people. And like a lot of the time, employers or anyone picks up on that immediately if you demonstrate some basic comprehension about engaging with others. And this comes out clarity in one's writing that they accumulate as they go through school and learn this stuff, like way more than just using ChatGPT or something, because ChatGPT just gives the most generic type like cover letters you can ever ask for. Like, I am well equipped for this job because I meet the basic competencies and objectives as laid out in your most recent human resources efforts to diversify the workplace and the level of inclusion, thinking, and blah, blah, just very basic stuff. But yeah, in the humanities, people can really get develop a voice that will stand out and really resonate with people. Happy to hear it. I wish I could pronounce your name. I Posechia. I'm sorry if I butchered that. Uh, I'm, can't say I can pronounce Polish names very well. Posechia. The audio is wonky. Oh no, I'm sorry to hear that. Could it be louder? Could it be quieter? Pataphysics. Oh no, I'm sorry if the microphone isn't good. I'm not entirely sure if I can change it. Let me test something. Let me know if it sounds better now or okay, this is one, and let's test number two. Is this better? Let's call that two. One or two. No, noise cancellation. Oh, that's too bad. Noise cancellation. Oh, bizarre. Oh, wait. Let me know if this is better. If it is a microphone or a headphone thing. Is it better? Oh, it was picking up my headphones. Sorry about that. My God. Y'all should have told me sooner. Jeez. Sorry about that. Okay, well, there. We're moving up in the world, everyone. We're moving up in the world. Okay, where are we at here? Pataphysics. Yeah, pataphysics. The science of imaginary solutions, I think. Is that how it goes? Pataphysics is all about play. It's about not submitting to the certainty of science and to recognize that there are no, there's no such thing really as facts. And I don't mean that in the, postmodern neo-Marxist type way, but I mean that in that no fact is even valuable unless there's been some kind of a narrative attributed to it or attached to it. No one walks around the world being like, here's my accumulation of facts that for today, like get up, now I walk, now I step downstairs, now I brush my teeth. Like no one lives that way. And you never bring facts to a courtroom and just drop them on the counter and you're like, oh well, that's it, there's the case. They're always accompanied with a narrative. And pataphysics, I think, emphasizes the importance of that narrative and like even the play within it, and really how it problematizes often what is like, and I wouldn't even say this is of science, but popular views of science and like facts and objectivity, that they just tell their own tales when that's facts don't talk, Yeah, I imitate ChatGPT well. Okay, I mean, good. I would love to cover Du Bois. It's like definitely the soul of Black folks, I think is the title. I really have to cover it. Noise cancellation. Okay. Yeah, y'all were just way too nice. You had to be like, David, please. My God, this is horrible. But I'm happy to know that the sound is better now. Silly headphones. This ruins everyone. Filthy hobbit. And I actually don't even know if the audio what do I think of the current state of Canada with regards to colonialism? I mean, it's not great. For years they've just like denied it, and then when it came down to actually addressing it, it was just like, yeah, you can still practice your culture. Whether or not you'll actually have like, you know, self-governance or autonomy is a totally different thing. I think it's very much like, whereas in the United States, like no one seems to recognize it or acknowledge that there's like a colonial history at all. Like it's just like not considered. Canada is definitely better in that respect, but they do rely upon very, like, it's just the handbook of the Liberal Party is to try to like make it seem like they care about something. Lee Edelman's No Future, or yeah, maybe one day. You should tell me why I should do it. I'd like to know if it's what's the selling point of Edelman's work. I don't really know it. Any good books you could recommend? It depends what you're into. Good books. The book that I always recommend is Roberto Calasso's The Ruin of Kosh. That was one of the most like influential books for me. Also other classics like, you know, Judith Butler's Gender Trouble is just like life altering, at least for me. What else? Yeah. The cats are inside. The cats are inside. I'm outside. Like the place we're in is so tiny that it's like one room. So this is the way to get a little extra space. Yeah, exactly. Laura Lee. Yeah, if we see and recognize Indigenous people, no reparations or land back. Yeah, that is part of the strategy, is to just make it seem that all that's needed is recognition. And if you want more on that, I would definitely recommend Glenn Coulthard's Red Skin, White Masks. Really great book. Unpacking Canada's colonial history, but also the strategies it's recently employed. This book was written a decade or so ago, but that it's employed in the late 20th, early 21st century to provide the veneer that they care about these issues. What is your opinion on the conspiracy of art? It's one of those texts. It's hard to cover because it's just like a collection of essays. So there isn't like a guiding thread, right? I hope I'm not misremembering it, but that's what I think it is. And I'm actually not a huge fan of Baudrillard's view of art. Like, I think that it's just like, he's a dude. He had some opinions, and he just I don't know if they're like mind-altering opinions or just kind of the basic overview or basic perspective. But I like them nevertheless, and I think his photography was actually quite good. So, but yeah, the conspiracy of art. I'd need to reread it to get a sense of whether or not it's something I would cover. Can recommend some contemporary developments on critical theory. I want to read something that has been created after Laclau. Yeah, more recent stuff. I really don't keep up with like the more recent stuff because it takes so long to read a book, and there's new books coming out every day. It's really hard to keep on top of it without just relying upon Wikipedia pages to tell me summaries of books, which I find are almost never really accurate. Some more recent stuff, most of it is just coming, like, that I know about is just friends of mine who are writing stuff. Like a surprising number of people I don't know, I've somehow come into contact with and keep up with, do a lot of work on Laruelle, which is Laruelle's never really made sense to me. Not at the level of comprehension, but at the level of like urgency behind what he's saying. But it could just be that I don't understand. But more contemporary stuff, and it helps that Laruelle's still alive. More contemporary stuff. I know that Malibu just wrote a new book on industry in France, I think. Yeah. What is the most excruciating text? Probably the one I struggled with the most was Kant's First Critique. I remember reading Kant's First Critique and just being like so overwhelmed, and probably most by the term manifold. I just couldn't grasp the idea of manifold, and then it's just like everything you see out in the world, like the manifold, like the entirety of like all that you're engaging with of a different given topic or area of concern. So that one I struggled with. It made the phenomenology of spirit a lot easier to understand. But I think that, the phenomenology of spirit, the standard version that was translated by Finlay or who, God, I can't even remember who translated it. The version that breaks down every single paragraph in the back of the book, is it like Sheridan or something? Who did that? Phenomenology of spirit. Sorry, as I'm Googling this, if someone in the chat's put the answer and I'm still fumbling around through this. It's this version, the A.B. Miller and Finlay. Yeah, it is Finlay. Analysis by Finlay. That's really helpful. And maybe if I didn't have that, the phenomenology of spirit would have been rougher. But otherwise, Derrida's obviously pretty hard. Yeah, what else is tough? Eve Sedgwick's The Epistemology of the Closet's a tough one. Oh my God. There's also Lauren Berlant's Cruel Optimism. Oh, that's a tough one to read at the level of just comprehending the prose. Happy to hear it. Weird. Solosky. Happy to hear it. Goat Jail. What was he developing a conservative streak? Yeah, I mean that's a good question. I remember asking a prof of mine in undergrad about this, and he believes that while Baudrillard seems to be this radical, free thinking, apolitical thinker, in a lot of cases his work does devolve into a kind of conservative reactionism, especially against Marx. And if you read the Mirror of Production, where he lays out his biggest criticisms of Marx and Marxism, a lot of it I find is not justified, but even though a lot of the points I think are really valid, but it's hard too, because he really does resist being classified into any kind of political party or political view, because he certainly wouldn't be accepted by the conservatives given his emphasis upon play and disrupting kind of naive faith in any given narrative, be it science or religion or anything. Sinara Taylor's book, Beasts of Burden. No, I haven't, Ben. If you think I should, tell me why. Why was Butler so profound for you? I mean, just in the basic premise of gender trouble, I thought was just changed my view of the world. But actually, Undoing Gender as well, I thought it just it made gender and many of the reactionary oppositions to anything that deviates from the gender binary, it just made it so apparent how unfounded all of those concerns are, how they just comply with a general moral panic, but also asking us to interrogate the very markers by which we understand gender, and are able to classify gender even within the cisgender binary with men and women. What are the markers we use to actually define or to illustrate what a man is versus what a woman is? And are these things really found in nature? And Butler's point is to say that, they have no idea if there's this true idea about what a man is, and all people physiologically born that way should embrace that. And they're so clear about that they just don't know. But they interrogate the markers that we often just associate with masculinity, playing with toy cars as opposed to Barbies, as though there's anything natural about children playing with either of those sets of toys. Anyways, while it might seem obvious to most people, for me it was oh my God, this is revolutionary. Happy to hear it, Sage. I hope that they're helpful. Yeah, it was Miller, Robert. It was Miller. I wonder if the 300 lectures by Great. Oh no. Greg Sadler has to. He's doing the he's breaking it down every single paragraph. It just had to be that long. I remember having to. Some of his videos were really helpful for me because there are a few, like when Hegel's going on and on about finding the notion or whatever he's on about. It's like I just didn't know what that meant. I just couldn't grasp it. And to be honest, I've never really encountered a satisfactory answer. Like it still remains kind of ambiguous and unclear to me. But I think that Sadler does a really good job at like, and this is what I really think is the value like of what Sadler does, like because he's the world's the internet philosophy teacher as far as I'm concerned. But what he does really well is like making it okay. It'd be okay if you don't understand something, and like he has a lot of humility and like really emphasizing when things are difficult and like what's how hard it can be to actually work through these issues, and that people will have varying interpretations. I think that's really his value, and that all this to say that I don't think his videos have made it harder to understand, but easier to. Thank God Miles is here. Amazing. Butler's Precarious Life. It's been a long time since I've read that one, but I think it was good. I should cover it on here. I should probably read it again. On Free Will, Robert Sapolsky, Determine Life Without Free Will. I don't know. I've never read that, so I can't really speak to it. Robert Sapolsky. Oh, this is the guy, the YouTube guy who does lectures at, where is he? Oh, he taught at Harvard? Yeah, I mean, I don't know. He's like the guy that says we don't have free will or something. I mean, I don't buy that. I don't. Well, I do, but I think that it's more complicated. I think it could be a mix of both to some extent. Because I think that just submitting to either that we have free will or we don't I just find it neither helpful nor these questions I often actually I'm like, I don't care because I will never know. But well, I always just divert back to Kant at the end of the first critique, the Critique of Pure Reason, when he's talking about the dialectic of the dialectic of pure reason, I think is what it's called, when he's presenting arguments for either there being space and time are infinite or they're finite, and what that would necessarily mean for like free will, where he makes the point that like a counterintuitive point I thought at the time, at least for me, was that if space and time are infinite, that is, extending forever, then there's no free will. Which seems like, wait, how do you make that leap? And his point is to say that if it is infinite, there's no free will because every single effect was produced by something. It has a cause. And so you are determined by every single thing that came before you that will shape your possibility. It'll shape who you can be. It'll shape your entire life. Like every single decision, every single force that has acted upon you and shaped who you are has had this effect and has essentially like limited who you can be. So in that sense, like, do we have free will? Like, not really. However, he suggests that if space and time are not infinite and instead they're finite, and there's like a starting point to space and time, that implies that the universe holds space for newness in the very creation of itself at all. And this permits newness to actually come into the world at various points. And he's like, it could be either of these hypotheses, like nobody knows. I just tend to also resist the idea that like there's no free will, especially in the religious sense, where the Christian sense, where everything is determined by God in advance. Because I just don't think this is a world that any intelligent creator would have come up with. I just don't think that it's just like there's a deity who's like, yeah, we'll create the world this way. I don't know. What do you all think? We have free will? Alain Benoist? I'm not familiar. from my experience, humanities, social studies classes have tended to be more female. I wonder if you think getting more men into them would be beneficial, or this would be the wrong way to think. I think that's the wrong way to think about it. And I think that there's various reasons why different fields are gendered the way they are. I don't think that it's a coincidence. But yeah, I mean, I think that I just it's not something I really think about in those terms. Take a shot if you just related to David's exasperated sigh. Yeah. La place de Mont, des Monts. I don't know that. That place is demon. Beast of Burden is complex, like most philosophy. It's animal lib plus disability studies. It explores the connection between the two disciplines in a really cool way. Its critique of Singer is poignant. Yeah, that sounds good. Disability studies and animal, like critical animal studies, I don't know enough about, and I should know more about. Do healthcare workers in general have a medical gaze? And if so, are there any properties of it you believe you could speak to? Any developments in the wake of the pandemic in U.S. single payer debate? I don't know if I have any novel insight in the single payer debate. Obviously, I don't think that healthcare and people's health should just be subject to the same market forces as like luxury goods. You know, same goes with housing for me. But in any case, yeah, I think that all healthcare workers exemplify some kind of a medical gaze insofar as they're part of that institution. And in terms of the pandemic, I think that the pandemic really put it on display what Foucault wrote about in The Birth of the Clinic, where in The Birth of the Clinic, Foucault is like, we have to be very careful not to assume that healthcare or emphasis on people's health and having a healthy body politic and a healthy public, he's like, we have to be very careful not to just think that these developments happened because of care, of people in power, of policymakers, of academics wanting to necessarily just make the world better. Like, there are lots of cases where that's true, but he's like, much of our medical knowledge actually emerged because rich people wanted to test medical stuff on poor people so that they could guarantee that they'd get like good health care later in life when they needed it. Not to mention that much of the way that we approach disease was motivated by certain efforts to treat the population as this like homogenous mass that needs to be like very much regulated and controlled, which was put on display, I think, in the pandemic, which I think that at the same time, I think that many of the measures that governments took, albeit drastic, at the time was inspired out of fear and not knowing what to do, which is a sign that we were not prepared and should have been way more prepared for something like that. But yeah, while it might appear that these intense, like draconian measures were inspired by care, I think that if that were true, what we would have seen was less of that and more of like making sure that marginalized communities were getting first access to vaccines because they would be the ones that they were the most disproportionately affected, or parts of the world where vaccines are less accessible would have been the first people to get it. But that's not what we saw, which I think is evidence to me that like these measures had less to do with keeping the people healthy and more to do with treating people like these non-autonomous automatons, essentially, to be just told about their health, to be told about what's best for them and everything like this. While at the same time, me thinking that like a lot of these measures were necessary just because we were wholly unequipped and had no other option, lest like however many more thousands and tens of thousands of people may have died. Do you have any advice for undergrad students wanting to pursue a career in academia? I'd love to be a professor, but I've heard some discouraging things, especially in the political philosophy. Yeah, like there just aren't that many jobs. It's very competitive. It's not a fun time in that way. If you really love the material, do it. I really recommend, if you're an undergrad doing, I really recommend people do a master's degree. I know that, I don't know where you are, I know that in the States it's quite popular. It's quite common for people to do like the joint master's PhD programs. And while there's an argument to be made for that, especially in terms of funding, um, I just tend to really support the idea. I just really support the idea that people do these things separately and do a master's degree and have the time to reflect and be like, do they really want to go and do that again, but much longer, with a lot less guidance and a lot less support, and it's not something you necessarily are aware of with it before starting. And yeah, do a master's degree. That'd be my advice, and then see from there. Thanks, ET. What you think about the problem of evil and suffering, both logical and evidential? I don't know. It's like, obviously, I think that it's. I think that as humans, we have an obligation to minimize suffering of everybody in all forms. And maybe I'm just inspired by the utilitarians in that way. But I know that's. I mean, I'm not a policymaker. I don't know how to put these things into practice in the most effective way, especially with such like an abstract question. But that suffering should be dealt with, and that the category of evil that we in the West often adopt, I think, needs serious overhaul, where like somebody on the street asking for change is seen as being more of a nuisance to the public than like big finance capitalists who are just stealing money from people and then taking it out of the economy and putting it in their like Swiss bank or something. Like it's this, the way we view one of these people as being evil and the other as being like having succeeded. The grind set, needs serious overhaul. Nietzsche had a long mustache and Deleuze had long fingernails. Is there some connection there? I don't know. Maybe. Maybe. Yeah. Humans do have free will, but God determines some aspects in life, like death and nature of law. Yeah, I mean, God could will that there's free will, and God is like, I mean, that's how the story goes, is that you have free will and God will judge you later, at least some interpretations. But yeah, and even, do you really have a choice if you're given a choice? Pointers for anyone just starting Foucault. Yeah, watch my videos or listen to them. I mean, I break down most of his texts. You can come and join Occidental College, teach a Foucault class. You can sit in on that. But where to start with Foucault? I mean, I wouldn't start with like the order of things and the archaeology of knowledge. I find that stuff is, I would have found it really intimidating if I'd started there. I started with the institutional stuff, like his critique of, or his performing a history of the prison, I think is the best place to start. Discipline and Punish, then Madness and Civilization, then the history of sexuality. The Birth of the Clinic's fine. Read that if you're feeling up to it. But after reading those other three, then I would say go and read the Archaeology of Knowledge. And then if you're feeling really eager, read the Order of Things. That's the order that I would subscribe. And then consume as much content online explaining it as you can. Hospital social worker uses postmodern therapy called narrative therapy, which is heavily influenced by Foucault and his understanding of power, a machine that no one owns. Interesting. There's a medical gaze, hard to resist, but I think it's important. I don't think that hospitals should be torn down overnight and we're like, well, we have to figure this out anew. Obviously, they serve a very important function, and clearly, I mean, I would show you, but I'm all scarred up from all my surgeries from the past few that I had to have last year and previous surgeries. So obviously, I don't think it's wrong outright, but I think that work could be done to give people more of a voice, because I think a lot of the time, especially in a gendered way, women especially are often spoken at instead of listened to in hospital settings. where their pain is not taken as seriously as men's a lot of the time, and their experiences and knowledge of their own body is often discredited or disavowed in favor of the doctor's prescriptions. I think that can definitely be improved. I can't get my bachelor's. Am I missing out? I think independent study's enough. I definitely don't think you need to do a bachelor's. What did you feel was valuable about a traditional university? Just being exposed to so much stuff. I think that if I was just left on my own, I wouldn't have known where to look, which is like, one of the things even with ChatGPT and stuff. It's like ChatGPT is only as good as someone is able to give it good questions. Like ChatGPT is never going to wake me up in the night and be like, "You ever think of this thing?" Like, that's not going to happen. But yeah, I think that individual independent study is as good, and in some cases better, than directed university studying, especially because I think colleges are still, it's about testing. It's very disciplinary in a lot of ways still. And I don't know if there's a better way to do things. I would like to think that colleges could be more like an opportunity to engage with people who've really studied stuff, and it's more of a collaborative process instead of this very stark divide between person with knowledge and people without knowledge, and you assess that knowledge through their ability to recite what the person with knowledge knows. It just feels to me that education could be so much more than that, but I don't know, it might, yeah. The Trump stuff on IJBS. How might a politician employing Baudrillard's fatal strategies act on the contemporary stage? Fatal strategies? I don't know. They, on the, like, in a political way, they would probably, they'd obviously resist American hegemony. There's a really, one of my favorite lines from that book, and I don't remember it verbatim, but it's like, he's like, how does it go? He's like, terrorism is still a lesser evil than, God, I hate loud cars. Terrorism is still a lesser evil than a police state capable of ending it. And I think that's a really great perspective. I mean, insofar as a state capable of ending terrorism would have to be like a dystopian, absolute police state of endless, complete and total surveillance and no liberty at all. And I think that they would really need to hold onto that idea in a perpetual effort to oppose American hegemony and other efforts at like hegemonically capturing other nations and other people. But I also think in part Baudrillard would be like, we need to get rid of like these huge states. It's so absurd to me, and it brings me back to Benedict Anderson's imagined communities, especially because, like, I live in Montreal as well as in LA, but just to use the Montreal example, like, I have so much more living in Montreal. I have so much more in common with someone in like Vermont than I do with someone living in Alberta, in rural Alberta, or someone living in like rural Northwest Territories. Yet I'm supposed to have more of an affiliation with them because of the shared national identity that is like a big simulation, essentially. Despite having more in common with someone in Vermont or Maine, or because of geographical proximity, our voices, like our accents, like that. Is there any merit to metamodernism, postmodernism? I don't even know what that is. To be honest, I don't subscribe to this. We were talking about canon stuff earlier, like, and I think that really applies to like postmodernism, where I have no idea what that is. Like, I never read Deleuze and then Butler and Baudrillard and think, oh, they're all part of the same tradition. They're all, they can all be aligned that way, because they all disagree so much about everything. And I think that postmodernism was a term that was just thrown on all of these intellectuals, these French intellectuals, by like Americans who just were unwilling to seriously engage with what they were saying, especially Foucault, who I think is the most concrete of all of them, and yet is treated as this like, anti-enlightenment, anti-rational thinker, when I think he's the total opposite of that. But American intellectuals didn't want to have anything to do with these French thinkers, and so they just like, oh, they're just postmodernists, whatever. Like, what? That's so reductive. Favorite movies? Oh, that's a question. I really like favorite movies. God, what have I seen? What have I seen that's good lately? All the classics. I really like 2001: A Space Odyssey. That one affected me a lot. I watched Women Talking not long ago. That was really good. That one really stood out. I watched The Menu recently. That was good. Bodies, Bodies, Bodies was fun. God, I don't know. I wish I've seen more of the classics, quote unquote. I like Drive when that came out. That was fun. I wish I had more sophisticated answers. I'm like a dilettante, but not so, because I don't think I claim to be sophisticated in my taste. But I like suspenseful, psychological thriller type movies that'll make me think. I like mystery films. Like I normally enjoy those, especially when the ending, like, I find with a good mystery movie, at the end, you have to be like, oh, it has to all like click, not like, oh, and here's the solution. Like, I watched the Glass Onions movie with Daniel Craig, the Knives Out sequel, and I don't think I've ever been so offended by a movie in my life. Not in like offended way, but that a movie would insult the viewer's intelligence as much as Glass Onions. Just like explaining everything. It's like, oh, and then this happened, and this happened. Like, where's the mystery? You just told me everything that happened. I don't understand. Oh yeah, Synecdoche, New York. Yeah, great movie. Philip Seymour Hoffman classic. Yeah, that I watched that in a class, in a course I took in undergrad, which reminds me of the whole swath of other great movies we watched. Like, I like Kubrick. I like a lot of Kubrick's movies. But some great movies, other ones we watched in that class, like Before the Rain, was a really good one. There's Kieslowski's Blue. I mean, the entire Kieslowski, the Colors trilogy, the red, white, and blue trilogy, obviously are amazing. Killing of a Sacred Deer. I haven't seen that yet. That's with, is it Nicole Kidman or Colin, one of the Colin Firth? I don't know. One of those dudes. He has a mustache. Whatever. Thoughts on John Rawls? John Rawls. I guess I should have thoughts on John Rawls. I'm teaching a class called Justice. But I mean, it's fine. It's fine. But yeah, David Lynch is fine, but Twin Peaks kind of bothered me. I find after the first season, it got so like strange, and the plot lines got so separate and detached that I couldn't even make sense of it. But yeah, if there's anything else, I got a jet, everyone. Thanks for tuning in, and yeah. On that note, I'll see you all at 80K. Bye, y'all.